It all seems so long ago.
Remember? I'm not sure I can.
Do I remember? Of course I remember. I still feel like one of the walking wounded.
So many of my decisions were made by me I have trouble imagining today.
I remember how young we were.
Feeling embarrassed, I was so ill-informed.
Being confused all the time.
Sense of urgency to every action, no matter how small.
Challenging authority and being upset whenever anyone challenged me.
Giving up friendships of people whose politics I disagreed with.
I remember rushing to my dorm to get back before curfew.
I remember staying in my boyfriend's room to avoid dealing with curfew.
I remember my boyfriend being impatient with me every time we disagreed politically.
Being yelled at by my parents long distance while friends slipped me notes of what I should say back to them.
Sitting in the library, thinking that if I could come up with the perfect words that I myself could end the war.
I remember anxious dreams that I had gotten drafted.
Going to a Ravi Shankar concert and whiffing the smoke of pot.
Having to skip a major demonstration because my mom was visiting campus that day.
I remember the taste of tear gas.
Seen my physics professor in tears after Kent State.
Being afraid federal troops would be marching down the road to my college.
The thrill of seeing the Oberlin College banner on the Washington Monument.
I would like on record that not everyone during my school's Vietnam years sided with the revolution.
I remember heady days of power and possibilities.
This is the truth.
The truth.
The truth.
The truth.
As best as I can remember it. I remember coming to Oberlin College, September 1964. My hair is short, because everybody's hair is short, unless you're in a rock group.
Oberlin College was the first college in the United States to admit women and Blacks. And after a few days here, I also see that Oberlin has a high percentage of overachieving intellectual neurotics, which means I'm going to fit right in.
Oberlin was my first choice, even before I was rejected by Harvard, Stanford, Cornell, and Brown.
This is WOBC-FM, the voice of Oberlin College. Audio radiance for our radio audience. And now the news on this beautiful fall day in 1964. The Warren Commission released their final report today, finding that there was no conspiracy in the assassination of President Kennedy. On the campaign trail, Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater accused President Johnson of being, quote, soft on communism. In the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon, attempted coup d'etat failed to overthrow the government of Nguyen Con, which is South Vietnam's fifth government in 10 months. Finally, a hearty WOBC congratulations to actress Jane Fonda, who today married French film director Roger Van Diem.
So here I am at Oberlin. I just finished my first day of classes, and already I'm 2 weeks behind. Of the 2,700 students here, I estimate 2,600 are smarter than I am. Actually, I think the other 99 are smarter than I am. They just don't apply themselves. I live in North Hall with 240 other freshman boys, all horny. I can understand why they keep the girls on the opposite end of the campus.
My first night here, there's a meeting in my dorm where the house mother reminds all of us girls about social rules.
Freshman girls have to be in the dorms by 11 p.m., except on Saturday night when you're completely free, until 12:30. Men can visit you in the main lounge, but that's it. Except on Sunday afternoon when men can visit you in your room, but the door has to remain open the width of a wastebasket and 3 feet must remain on the floor at all times.
First thing tomorrow, I'm going shopping for the thinnest wastebasket I can find.
Oberlin Review, October 6th, 1964. Student Senate concentrated on national issues Sunday night, expressing its support for the re-election of President Lyndon Johnson.
When I come here my freshman year, I support Johnson 100%. That SOB Goldwater would just love to expand the war in Vietnam, which is exactly what Johnson does after the election.
In the library, I stay up late reading journals like Ramparts and I.F. Stone's Weekly. There's stuff going on the newspapers aren't covering.
A few of us start going through the dorms, door to door, to convince students of the immorality of war. Some of us create a letter to be voted on in a campus referendum, telling Johnson Oberlin students oppose U.S. participation in the war. The campus defeats the letter by a landslide.
I hear that a campus-to-campus hunger strike has begun against the war. Students at one school fast until it's picked up by another school. I like this idea. It's non-violent, but traumatic. So my friend Dave and I decide to take up the strike for Oberlin.
Linda and I get lots of publicity from press and TV. We set up tables outside the dining halls with literature about the war. 30 students start fasting with us.
Most classmates eye us curiously. My roommate leaves bags of popcorn on my bunk.
After 6 days, students at nearby Kent State take up the fast. Thank God. Friends ask me if I feel like I've accomplished anything. I don't know. But as the nationwide movement against the war gets bigger and bigger, I know I was there at the beginning to help it grow.
I know the government noticed, because years later, I find information about the fast in my FBI file.
Oberlin Review, April 20th, 1965. 50 Oberlin students Saturday joined the largest group ever to picket the White House. Police estimated the crowd at 15,000.
I'm not sure I should go on the march, but Tom, my boyfriend's going, and
I'm sure you should go on the march.
so I pay my $5 and we're off on a bus to DC. When we arrive at Saturday at dawn, it's sunny and bright and the cherry trees are in bloom. We join the quickly forming crowd of demonstrators and from the White House. Tom comes from an activist family and is a veteran of many marches. He tells me,
Now walk slowly, Kathleen, so you don't get too tired.
organizations are handing out leaflets on every issue, left and right, or at least left. One advocates for the legalization of marijuana. Tom hands it back in disgust. I keep mine. In the afternoon, I join my voice with singers like Joan Baez and Judy Collins and 20,000 others as we stream down the mall to the Capitol building singing, "We Shall Overcome." The sunshine, the signs bent back in the breeze, the never-ending surge of humanity with me in the middle. I think this is what heaven will probably be like. On the bus ride home, I just start.
What's wrong, Kathy?
Nothing.
Then why are you crying?
I don't think Tom would understand my answer. I feel as if I'm finally having begun to be worthy of Jesus having come and died.
Oberlin Review, April 27th, 1965. According to local opinion, the number of college students smoking marijuana is rising. Among the signs of increased smoking is the growing familiarity on campus of words such as pot and head. 2 students said while using marijuana they listened to music they had never heard before and felt as though they understood exactly what the composer meant to put across.
WOBC News. President Johnson has ordered 13,000 more troops to the Dominican Republic to join the 7,000 troops already sent there to stop the civil war that began on April 24th. Johnson claimed that the rebel forces had been taken over by a band of communist conspirators. Johnson said, "I will not have another Cuba in the Caribbean." In sports, heavyweight Cassius Clay retained his title by knocking out Sonny Liston in less than 2 minutes. Have a knockout summer, folks.
Recording. Ooh, and I'm muted.
Okay. So how I spent my summer vacation, 1965. I spent the summer of 65 doing publicity for a summer stock company on Cape Cod. This is a big chance from the summer of 64, which I spent teaching English in Saigon. My dad was stationed there as an employee of the Agency for International Development. My whole family
Hang on,
moved
Sam,
there.
can you stop? Because,
Yeah.
okay.
How I spent my summer vacation, 1965. I spent the summer of 65 doing publicity for a summer stock company on Cape Cod. This is a big change from the summer of 64, which I spent teaching English in Saigon. My dad was stationed there as an employee of the Agency for International Development. My whole family moved there with him, but that's nothing new for us. I grew up in places like Athens and Karachi. I love Saigon and its people. I dated both American and Vietnamese men that summer, and I got used to going to sleep to the sound of mortar fire in the suburbs. In the summer of '65, I watched from Cape Cod as the Saigon I know gets destroyed. A boy I know goes for a walk in a field and gets blown up walking on a Viet Cong landmine. The bachelor office's quarters where my mom used to bring cookies is now rubble.
When I returned to college my sophomore year, I worked with a community group in a nearby town. It's in a slum where there are still dirt roads. I help them organize so they can get water and sewer lines. It's so weird traveling back and forth from the comforts of college to a slum. The people I work with, they're all against the war. Zach, they say, the money belongs at home. We have no right telling another country how it should think. You know, I was raised an Army brat, and I expected after college to do a stint in the Navy and then maybe have a career in the State Department. But my childhood goals, they become part of my childhood.
I think the Viet Cong are extremely evil and extremely dangerous. Once, just to kill 2 Americans, they destroyed an entire movie theater filled with Vietnamese. Most of my college friends are so opposed to US policy that nobody listens to me. And in Vietnam, a guy I used to date gets drafted, and I never hear from him again.
WOBC News. In South Vietnam, street mobs have rioted for 1 week in Saigon and other cities to protest the current government. Members of the mob range from students and communist agitators to Buddhist monks and Boy Scouts. For the first 100 days of 1966, 1,361 Americans have died in South Vietnam, which is more than all of those who died in 1965.
I just can't make up my mind about Vietnam. My father, he has all these intelligent arguments in support of the government position. My friends, they have all these equally intelligent arguments against the government position. After a while, the only conclusion I reach is that there's an overabundance of intelligence in the universe, very little of which has funneled down to me. Finally, I say, Harry, okay, maybe you're not the brightest guy on campus, but at least your desk is one of the best organized. So I go down to the snack bar to organize my thinking. I order a bagel and a coffee, and I sit down with a number 2 pencil and a paper, and I write down all of the arguments I've heard on both sides, every one I can remember, and I just look at them and look at them. How am I ever going to explain my decision to my dad?
The college administration would like for people to believe that they're neutral on the war, but they're not. Corporate recruiters are stuck at the graduate placement office and the administration building, but the military gets to set up a table right in the middle of the student union lobby.
Some of us think this has to be stopped.
When an Air Force recruiter comes in February 1967, 30 of us surround him in his display and we link arms.
We're obstructing recruitment and the perpetuation of the war.
We let nobody past us.
This totally shocks the recruiter, who remains trapped for over an hour.
Finally, he forces his way out. He goes downstairs to the snack bar and tries to set up shop there.
So we follow him down, surround him again, and link arms.
This really pisses off some jock types.
We insist on our right to be recruited.
A fight begins until...
The college closes the snack bar 11 hours early.
Military recruiters have never been in student unions since.
Oberlin Review, February 14th, 1967. The College Faculty Council has asked the administration to take whatever steps are necessary to ensure the rights of students to meet with recruiters.
It's important to me to learn how to judge a demonstration as a success or a failure. Our demonstration has caused more people to think and talk about the war than ever before. On the other hand, people are arguing about our tactics instead of focusing on the war. That's not what we want.
For the next demonstration, those of us who are hardcore activists decide we need to build up unity with what we call the soft left. Liberals, pacifists, uninformed, non-ideological people with anti-war impulses, folks like that.
When Navy recruiters visit on May 18th and set up shop in the graduate placement office, we devise a new kind of sit-in.
250 students sit in a checkerboard pattern on the floor. People can get by us, but it takes a while longer.
The tactics of this demonstration offend no one, but we create no new awareness or concern. So what did we really accomplish?
When the next demonstrations comes, I think we're going to have to be confrontational again.
I can't help but notice that almost everybody who shows up at our demonstrations is white. This bothers me, and so Bill and I set up a meeting with 2 of the black leaders on campus. The meeting itself is a sign of how things on campus have changed in a few years.
When I started here, the first thing I did was join the Oberlin Committee Against Racism. That's gone now. The whites who were on it are pretty focused against the war. The blacks have formed their own group to fight for more black studies in a black dorm.
At the meeting, one guy tells me he thinks we white boys are jerking off, that nothing we do on this campus against the war means shit. The other guy says he's more concerned with the war happening in the inner cities, that there's a war going on in our own backyard.
We never do organize any demonstrations together. You know, it's embarrassing, but I have to admit, I don't even have any black friends on campus. In Tennessee, I do, but not here.
WOBC News. Heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali, formerly Cassius Clay, has refused to report for induction into the draft. Ali said, "No Viet Cong has ever called me nigger."
Okay. Oberlin Review, May 2nd, 1967. At midnight Sunday, 150 men ushered in May Day with a 2-hour riot. The purpose was to protest several key campus issues. Another possibility was to hold the year's first panty raid. The mob then noisily made their way to Talcott Women's Dormitory, where, responding to an anguished cry of
Panties, panties,
an
panties.
unknown heroine tossed her red bikini underwear to the anxious crowd below.
So there I am, a freshman, retyping my term paper with wider margins so I can stretch it to meet the page requirement. In the next room, there's a bunch of girls on beds, bouncing and giggling at the activity below.
Panties, panties, panties.
If it means so much to them, why don't they just go downtown and buy a pair? It's so high school, you know, where girls are supposed to be dumb and defenseless and purposefully lose at games so the boys will feel better. Why can't the boys lose at games sometimes to make us feel better?
Panties, panties,
I can't get any more. So I run into a bathroom, fill a bucket with water, climb onto the fire escape, and
panties, panties. Oh, damn it.
As I climb back inside, I notice some other women here and there who look as ungiggly about the whole thing as I am.
We start to talk about all the things that bother us about the way we're supposed to act.
About all of the ways we think life should be for men and women.
And I get this wonderful, warm feeling, the kind you get when you discover you're not alone.
How I spent my summer vacation in 1967. In the summer of 1967, I live with my sister's family in Chicago and I work as a waitress. I also attend weekly meetings of the Young Socialist Alliance. One night, the speaker is a handsome merchant sailor, an older guy around 30. We strike up a friendship and attend meetings together. I introduce him to all of my socialist friends. He's an old-fashioned guy. He insists on picking me up and bringing me home to my sister's house. My sister and her husband, they're both school teachers with the Chicago's public schools. And they like the guy. I like him too. The next fall, he visits me at Oberlin and meets all of my friends there. A week later, I receive a panicked call from my sister. She tells me my sailor friend paid them an unexpected visit. He showed them his credentials as an FBI agent. He threatened that unless I stopped my activities, they could lose their jobs. I immediately ceased my socialist pursuits so my relatives wouldn't be punished because I'm exercising my freedom.
Welcome back to Campus Campers. This is WOBC-FM, Ohio's #1 source for static. In South Vietnam's first popular election, Nguyen Van Chieu, representing the current military junta, was elected president with 27% of the vote. In the days before the election, the government closed 2 newspapers for being, quote, sympathetic to the enemy. So far this year, 6,721 U.S. fighting men have died in Vietnam, which is more than the combined total for the last 6 years. Here on campus, the Faculty Student Life Committee has rejected a Student Senate proposal which would allow each dorm section to determine its own social rules. However, the committee voted to allow, for the first time in Oberlin history, that when men visit women in their rooms, women may now shut their doors.
Oberlin Review, October 3rd, 1967. Student Senate has sent a letter to administration calling for an end to military recruitment on campus. Navy recruiters are scheduled to visit on October 26th and 27th.
Okay, so by now I've decided I'm against the war. Half of my dorm section is. But now I have to deal with this military recruitment issue. So I've made my lists again, and well, on one hand, I believe in freedom of speech and access to information, regardless of what that information is. On the other hand, recruitment is an integral part of the war machine. If I allow it, then I'm passively aiding and abetting an immoral war. God, I wish it were 3 years ago, when the only thing my friends argued about was who was better, the Beatles or the Dave Clark 5. Shit, I'm late for my Philosophy 101 class.
In today's class, I'd like to start by...
Professor Daniels.
Yes?
What do you think about military recruitment on campus?
Well, my views on that subject, as on most things, are rather complex.
For the next hour,
I'd like to set out precisely what my views are, what arguments I use to support them, and what arguments I use to refute the arguments against them.
it's amazing. Everything he says is so, what's the word? Rational. After hearing Daniels for an hour, I've made my decision. I'm becoming a philosophy major. It's my 5th major this month.
WOBC News. It's been a busy week for anti-war demonstrators. In Berkeley, 3,500 rallied despite a court injunction against it. In Oakland, 10,000 marched on the city's draft induction center. In Boston Commons, 4,000 gathered to protest the war. 67 men burned their draft cards. Meanwhile, in preparation for this Saturday's march in Washington, Abby Hoffman has asked a General Services Administrator permission to raise the Pentagon 300 feet above the ground by chanting ancient Aramaic exorcism rites. The administrator gave Hoffman permission to raise the Pentagon a maximum of 10 feet.
I drive to the march with Dave and Linda in my 1957 Buick Special, which I've spray painted with anti-war slogans.
I'm totally unprepared for the number of demonstrators I see in DC. There must be 50,000.
What amazes me are the signs that people are carrying. They're not only demanding that the U.S. get out of Vietnam, but some call for victory for the Viet Cong.
Various radical collectives hand out flyers urging us to physically seize the Pentagon. We can do it, Dave.
Yeah, sure, Tom.
We've got the numbers.
Look at it, Tom. The Army has erected a hurricane fence around the entire Pentagon.
Look on the Pentagon's roof. Soldiers are pointing machine guns at us.
You two can stay back here, but I'm joining in.
Tom joins a group of thousands who try to tear down the fence around the Pentagon.
It takes us 1 minute.
The group moves towards the Pentagon doors.
Soldiers form a line in front of the Pentagon's doors, bayonets fixed on their rifles.
Tom, watch out!
A GI knocks Tom to the ground with his billy club. The GI swings his club over and over. Finally, he turns away and starts hitting somebody else.
The soldiers secure the Pentagon's door. Thousands of us face them, pleading with them to join us.
Hour after hour, we confront them, talking to them while they stand at attention, unable to respond in any way.
Several people walk down the lines of soldiers, placing flowers in the barrels of their guns.
And suddenly, one soldier drops his weapon and joins us. Then another and another.
It's only a half dozen, but these soldiers are risking court-martial and perhaps even firing squads. These are the memories I'll have of this day. of being beaten, and of seeing the other side lay down their weapons and join us. These are the images that will keep me going.
I'm with friends on the opposite side of the Pentagon. I'm with thousands of others in an area blocked by the Pentagon on one side, by a fence on another side, and a tall, thick hedge bordering a parking lot. For hours, the demonstration is peaceful, but after night falls and TV crews go away, soldiers start charging at us from the street, trapping us inside. People start running and shoving and crashing through the hedge to get to the parking lot. As I look back and see the soldiers running at me, it suddenly hits me. To my government, I'm the enemy.
When I return from seeing friends gassed and clubbed at the Pentagon, when I return to this oasis called college, I ask myself, what am I doing here? And then I ask, what can I do here?
Oberlin Review, October 21st. Students could not form a consensus at a meeting last night on what tactics to use against the upcoming visit by Navy recruiters. More meetings are scheduled.
I think it's essential to have a militant demonstration, a show of our commitment in the face of the college's refusal to take a stand on the war.
Right, Bill. We've got to do something, but we don't want everyone in the anti-war movement thrown out of school.
Every night for a week, we have these meetings.
I got it. Have the demonstration off campus. Go to the streets.
The night before the recruiter visits, I'm one of 90 students invited to a secret meeting.
If everyone could settle down, please. Thanks. Before I go any further, I want to remind everyone that what we're doing is serious. Laws will be violated, and we expect to get arrested. What we're doing could even be considered kidnapping. If anyone has any doubts about their commitment, this is the time to leave.
Only 3 people leave. Not bad.
Okay. Now, let's discuss strategy.
I don't know why I agreed to do this. I'm going to end up with an FBI record, and I'll never have the career of my choice, if I can ever figure out what that is.
Harry, phone call.
Phone call? It's midnight. Who would want to call me at... Hello? Oh, hi, Dean Fastman. Nice to hear from you. Meeting? What meeting? The secret meeting. Yeah, I was there. Could you excuse me for a moment? My lava lamp is overheating. He wants to know what we're planning for tomorrow. I've never lied to a dean before, and I don't even know if I support what my friends are doing. But I don't feel right ruining their plans. Maybe I should call Professor Daniels and ask what he'd do in this situation. Calm down, Harry. Just calm down. Dean Fastman, I assure you there will be no trouble on campus tomorrow. You're welcome. Good night. Well, I guess I've chosen sides, haven't I?
At 6 a.m., I bicycle to the library. I'm wearing a skirt, as skirts are supposed to be more acceptable to townspeople.
I'm in the town square with a walkie-talkie.
I'm at the truck stop at the end of town.
All roads are covered.
At 7:55, I see the recruiter's car just past the truck stop. I call the library.
I inform the others so that they can come back into town.
5 minutes later, I look down the road and can see him.
His car is surrounded by our cars and motorcycles.
He's right at the edge of the town square.
Our cars slow down.
He slows down.
He's going very slowly now. I walk out into the center of the road right in front of him. I lay my hands on his front grille and walk back slowly until his car stops.
We hop out of our cars.
We form a circle.
Girls inside.
The rest of us join them.
We surround the car.
We've done it.
Yes.
I tell the Navy recruiter, you leave town immediately and don't return. We'll let you go.
He says he's under orders. He can't go.
So we wait.
And wait.
I'm surprised. There isn't a policeman in sight.
It's cold. I wish I had worn gloves.
I get coffee and donuts. We all eat breakfast.
We offer coffee and donuts to the recruiter as well.
Then we wait.
Wait.
And wait.
Word reaches us that 2 other Navy officers drove into town by a different route and set up shop in the administration building.
I feel ridiculous.
There must be 80 of us around the car and 500 watching.
Some support us, some are against us, and some are here because we're the best show in town.
Some look like they'd like to join us, but they're too scared.
The recruiter keeps busy doing homework for a correspondence course.
I think of the classes I'm missing and wonder if I'll make my 2:30 class.
I'm beginning to have second thoughts about all this.
Harry.
College must be a place where people can have free access to information and ideas, even reprehensible ones. I'm leaving the line.
We wait some more.
Still no police.
Someone brings us more food.
I offer it to the Navy officer. He refuses. He looks in his late 30s. He's kind of cute.
Oh, ick.
He asks to be let out of the car to relieve himself.
We hold a meeting. We hadn't thought about this.
It's defeating ourselves if we let him go.
It's inhumane to keep someone trapped for so long.
Let him use a Coke bottle.
He's losing his patience. He says we're violating his civil rights, and if we don't let him go soon, he'll sue us.
Let's vote. Let him go? Make him stay. He stays.
He starts fumbling with his car key.
He starts his car.
He slams the gas pedal to the floor.
We cling onto the car on all sides.
He can't see where he's going.
His car goes 10 feet and rams into a reporter's car.
He missed a friend of mine by inches.
We grab the back end of the car and lift it up.
We put logs under the back tires.
He can't move now.
And we've stuck together.
We reform our group.
He really pisses me off.
He still needs to use the bathroom.
Fuck him.
People are getting mad. I don't like this.
Zach and I have a meeting and decide.
We're going to let him go.
Why?
Bill and I have decided that holding the car is as much a symbol as holding the man.
Give me a break.
We let him out.
We watch him go to a nearby gas station.
5 minutes pass.
Slowly.
Oh my God.
In the distance, a troop of white-helmeted state troopers marched down the street.
Behind the cops are fire trucks.
As the firemen are hooking up their hoses, I imagine the hoses of Birmingham and Selma.
They're scared. You can see it in their faces.
They don't know what to do. Neither do we.
An officer with a megaphone gives us to the count of 3 to disperse.
You're bluffing.
The officer says 1.
If you want to arrest us, we won't resist.
2.
We've discussed this last night. We won't resist arrest.
3.
Suddenly, fire hoses turn on us.
Tear gas canisters hit the ground.
I cover my face.
I hold my breath.
I can't see.
The gas burns my skin.
Stick together.
I'm scared.
Stick together.
Tear gas is supposed to make you disperse, but
we stick
together.
Together.
A steaming canister lands half a foot away.
I pick it up and toss it back at the police.
When they run out of gas, they stop.
And we're still
Together. The air is permeated.
Bystanders have suffered as much as we have.
Zach,
What?
what do we do now?
Good question.
We'll march to the police station and demand they confront us.
When we get to the station,
They've locked us out.
so what do we do now?
We'll have another meeting tonight to discuss what we've done and decide where we go from there.
As I bicycle back to my dorm, tear gas crystals in my pocket socks start burning through my skin. I pedal as fast as I can, run to my dorm bathroom, strip, and shower.
I sit in the dorm lounge with my friends. We stare at each other silently through swollen eyes.
I hear the bells of the school chapel ring. I have just enough time to make my 2:30 class. I decide not to go.
From this moment on, it's clear to me that one day anti-war demonstrators will be killed.
I feel like I've just grown up.
That evening, We watch ourselves on TV.
My father calls. He says if I ever get involved in something like this again, he'll disown me.
The national president of SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, calls to congratulate me. He offers to send speakers and carloads of supporters for whatever we plan to do next. I tell him we can handle things ourselves.
New York Times, October 30th, 1967. In response to recent developments, Oberlin College canceled classes today to present an all-campus think-in to discuss the problems of war and anti-war protesting. Although attendance was voluntary, 2,000 of the school's 2,700 students attended.
Oberlin Review, February 27th, 1968. 26 students have pleaded no contest after being arrested for disorderly conduct in connection with last October's surrounding of a Navy recruiter's car. Judge D.R. Goldthorpe told the students,
You have the option of paying a $50 fine, spending 10 nights in the Oberlin jail, or doing 20 hours of public service.
One of the students asked,
Is it okay if I spend my 20 hours working for the presidential peace candidate, Senator Eugene McCarthy?
The judge considered the request
inappropriate.
Not all of us who were arrested plead no contest. I enter a plea of not guilty. I retain a progressive ACLU lawyer from Cleveland who agrees with my modest request to raise at my trial the constitutionality of the war in Vietnam. I think the other side hears about this because on the eve of my trial, the case is dismissed. Oh, and 20 years later, I became the executive director of Alliance for Justice.
A week after the Navy recruiter incident, my father is assigned to Vietnam. While he's there, my stepmother throws me out of the family. You see, the FBI has begun asking our neighbors about me, and that sort of flips her out. Besides, her daughter, my stepsister, she just turned 13, and my stepmom doesn't want her influenced by me.
I read about my alma mater's Navy recruiter demonstrations in Stars and Stripes while serving as an Army helicopter pilot in Vietnam. I was drafted shortly after dropping out of Oberlin in '64. I didn't want to remain a private, so I volunteered to attend officer candidate school and flight school. By the time I complete these courses, I'm a first lieutenant on orders to a full-blown war. I don't like the war, but I do believe in our system of government. So if our elected representatives decide this is necessary, then I'm no better than the other thousands of troops sent over, and I have to do my best. My friends and I are involved in many projects to help the Vietnamese in agriculture, medicine, and construction. But as hard as we work, the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese work even harder to destroy any progress we make, while our side works hard to destroy any progress they make. The more I get to know the Vietnamese, the more I see how desperately they want to be free. But from whom? It's a quagmire, and I don't see any winners.
I graduate in the spring of '68, and I immediately get my draft notice. I moved to Boston because in the Midwest, you can get 5 years for draft evasion. In Massachusetts, only 2.
Oberlin Review, April 5th, 1968. 2 seniors will openly dissociate themselves from the draft tomorrow in a ceremony in Fairfield Chapel. They're the first Oberlin students to take such an action publicly.
May 24th, 1968. 215 male students have signed a pledge that they will not allow themselves to be inducted into the armed forces as long as the war continues.
I remember the draft.
I remember the draft.
I remember being in a car going home for winter vacation with Larry Delikowski and Arnie Lipskovitz, wondering if women will ever want to hyphenate their names with these guys. My very thin friend Larry says,
I'm not worried about the draft because I know just how underway you have to be to get medical deferment.
Arnie says,
I'm not worried because I have flat feet. So Harry, what's wrong with you?
Nothing. I'm in perfect health.
That's too bad.
I just learned my draft board My draft board physical is scheduled for November 10th, so I have 4 weeks to get thin. On October 15th, I'm 140 pounds. A week later, I'm down to 131. A week after that, I'm 126 pounds. By November 10th, I'm 120.4 pounds, 1.6 pounds under the wire. And all these years, I still carry the record in my wallet, just so I'll remember.
I spent the summer of 67 working in a nearby steel mill. I'm protected from the draft by my student deferment. The guys I work with, guys my age, they've got nothing to protect them. As the summer wears on, they're called up one by one. If you're not in college, the draft is a plague. Sooner or later, it'll get you. I feel guilty about that, but I don't know what to do about it. So I live with the guilt.
For a long time, I think about applying for a conscientious objector status. One night, I'm studying at the lab when this working class looking guy walks in. He asks me where the student union is. Then he asks me what percentage of the student body is Jewish. Then he asks me what percentage of the student body is Black. I ask him why he's asking. He tells me he wants to start up a campus chapter of the American Nazi Party. I tell him that many of my best friends and my girlfriend are Jewish. He starts to walk away, but just before he leaves, he says, "You know, if I ever get in power, I'll send your girlfriend to the gas chamber." Fury rises up in me like I've never felt before. If you ever get in power, watch out for me, because I'll put a bullet in your head. And as I hear myself say these words, I realize I can't be a conscientious objector. Yeah, I could kill if I think it's in defense of the human race.
When the government decides to end student deferments and institute a draft lottery, the first lottery is televised. I watch it in my dorm lounge with other students. As each date comes out of the bingo hopper, there are sighs of relief, murmurs of anxiety, and sometimes horrified screams. Nobody says much. We just keep watching as our futures are decided by a bingo hopper on TV.
When I finally decide to turn in my draft card, it feels like the most major decision I'll make in my life. My friends are very supportive, and so are my parents, God bless them. 3 others decide to join me in a ceremony at Fairfield Chapel. I'm surprised how many people show up. Friends, political associates, even some faculty members I would have never expected to see. I'm not by nature, a public speaker. I don't even raise my hand in class much. So I read from a paper what I'm about to say. Jail, this is part of it. Jail is not the greatest place in the world, but it is a viable alternative to going to a place where I'm forced to kill people I don't consider the enemy. I not only break this law, I pledge to work the rest of my life, if necessary, to get rid of it. It's up to us to make sure that the changes that happen in the world are the changes that we feel must happen. I'm tried and convicted on draft evasion charges. I finally win on appeal. Only then do I allow myself to feel that fear about how close I came to serving time.
After I finish Oberlin in 66, I'm feeling pretty desperate about what to do with my life. So I apply for the Peace Corps. After months of not hearing from them, I enlist in the Army. By the time I receive my Peace Corps acceptance, I'm already halfway through officers candidate school. After a year at Fort Knox, I'm shipped to Charleston, West Virginia. Among my duties is being a survivor assistance officer to widows or parents of soldiers killed in the war. It's my job to bring the message that their husband or son has died. I'm the one who tells them of benefits eligible to survivors. I'm the one who arranges for military honors at the burials. I want to help and I want to comfort. And sometimes I wish I had been the one killed. At one service, when I present the flag to the parents of the dead soldier.
Is that all those rich sons of bitches in Washington are giving us for our son's life?
I spend 68 and 69 burying young men. I bury my grief in alcohol and I keep burying myself in alcohol for another 12 years. Some of my buddies are still buried that way.
Oberlin Review, April 23rd, 1968. Over 100 students gathered last night for a symbolic funeral of the senior class. A coffin represented all the male students was lowered into the southwest corner of the town square. Following the burial, female students planted flowers.
Fall 1968. I'm still reeling from the events of the last 6 months. The assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, the failure of Gene McCarthy, Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia, the nomination of Tricky Dick Nixon, and worst of all, the police riot at the Chicago Democratic Convention. I feel a sense of gloom spreading over me and my friends. The pigs are winning.
Dear Bob, believe it or not, your cousin has survived high school and is now in college. I chose Oberlin because 1, I can continue my voice lessons while getting a good liberal arts education, and 2, it's as far away from home as my folks would let me go. I think I've arrived smack middle in the revolution. A lot of the big campus activists graduated last year. The ones left, well, they're a different breed. Everybody shouts, everybody's angry. At least those are the people who you notice first. I live in South Hall, Oberlin's first co-ed dorm. Mostly it feels like I have 60 older brothers. Thank God the men and women have different bathrooms. All in all, I like this place. Although, I do wonder why I'm here. My mom says it's so I can become well-educated, so I can raise well-educated children. Somehow, I don't think that will inspire me to pull all-nighters. I think about you every time I watch the news. Be careful, okay? Don't volunteer for anything but R&R. Love, Amy.
Those of us in Student Senate are working hard this year to bring reforms in the areas of student housing and student rights. We also vote once to have a closed meeting, so half the senators can share a joint. The left now controls the Senate, partially because we miscount ballots in favor of our candidates. I help, even though this practice cost me a Senate seat 2 years ago, when I wasn't considered radical enough for my colleagues. Since then, I've moved to the left. But then, who hasn't?
I haven't. I think what's happening on campus is disgusting. I walk on North Campus and see a path marked Ho Chi Minh Trail. The other day, students hung the Viet Cong flag from the balcony of the school's chapel. I'm no hawk, but the other side, they're not exactly Boy Scouts. You know? Are people too simplistic to grasp that maybe both sides are wrong?
You're listening to WOBC 88.7 FM on the far left of your dial. Students at San Francisco State College have begun a strike for more minority admissions. Governor Ronald Reagan called the strikers, quote, criminal anarchists and latter-day fascists, end quote. Yes, we all know how much those two groups love to hang out with each other. In local news, the Student Life Committee, currently composed of only faculty and administrators, has announced it may allow students to serve on the Student Life Committee. Finally, Richard Nixon has just been elected President of the United States. Either that or somebody at UPI has a sick sense of humor.
Dear Bob, Happy New Year from Oberlin, where my folks are letting me stay despite my first semester's grades. I'm tempted to blame it on my roommate, Elizabeth. She's a faculty brat and is way ahead of me culturally. When I first got here in September, Elizabeth insisted on hanging a Mao poster over the door. Then she watched me unpack. She took all of my dresses, my electric curlers, and my makeup, and she dumped them in the trash. Then she dragged me to the local Army-Navy store where she bought me a denim jacket, blue jeans, and a work shirt. I knew then that Elizabeth knew how to be a college student. When I got home from Christmas, Dad took one look at my army jacket, yelled at me for showing disrespect to the armed forces, and tossed it in the trash. I'm spending a lot of money on wardrobe this year. I pray for your safety, even though I'm not sure God exists. If you find out, please let me know. Love, Amy.
Oberlin Review, January 24th, 1969. More than 100 Oberlin students have gone to D.C. to join thousands protesting President Nixon's inauguration.
I wasn't planning on going to the counter inauguration because it's the same weekend as the Paul Butterfield concert in Cleveland. But my pal Isaac, who's in charge of the trip, he's just decided to drop out of school, and now I consider dropping out a very noble thing to do. So when he says, Jeffrey, you have to help us out, well, I have to say yes. Now, I've been to a lot of marches, but this is the first one that my fellow demonstrators leave in the morning wearing helmets and carrying clubs. The SDS plan is to push through the police lines and stop the inaugural parade. Now, I don't have a helmet or carry a club. I march behind those people. I'll admit it, I don't have the guts. We never get to the parade. The police start gassing us, so we run. And as we're running, we're smashing store windows. Our point is no business as usual. Now, I don't smash any windows, but for me to run next to someone smashing windows, I see that as the first step towards me gaining the ability to do machine gun battle with the Army. And that's my goal now. I want to be able to win an armed conflict with the United States government, because I no longer believe in this government or the powers that support it.
WOBC News. Here's the round of what's been happening on campuses this last week. At Berkeley, 100 police clashed with thousands of demonstrators supporting the demands of the Third World Libertarian Front. Cops were pelted with rocks, bottles, and firebombs. They fought back with mace, clubbing 4 students and arresting 24. At Eastern Michigan University, 200 students attempted but failed to seize their administration building. There were 12 arrests. At Roosevelt University in Chicago, students invaded the president's office and ripped out phones in a demonstration seeking amnesty for fellow radicals. And at the University of Wisconsin, students called off an 11-day strike which began with 7,000 students, but which was reduced to 300 after bayonet-wielding National Guard were called onto campus. And that's 1 week of campus life, February 1969.
Oberlin Review, February 11th, 1969. About 250 students met last night to discuss what to do when Marine Corps recruiters visit on February 20th.
This time, we do a tight sit-in again, with 50 of us packed tightly in front of the graduate placement office and another 200 people picketing for us in support. The Marines show up, but they can't get in.
At one point, a woman stands, holds some hair aloft, and sets fire to it.
This is the smell of burning hair. This is the smell of napalm.
Later, I notice a friend, St. Bernard, is missing a huge clump of hair.
At 9 a.m., Dean Fasman gives us half an hour to disperse. A half hour later, he and the other deans show up and start taking names and pictures.
We still don't leave. By 11 a.m., there are 250 of us seated tightly on the floor. Dean Fasman announces he's asked the Marines to leave campus.
Yes!
WOBC News. Over 10,000 Americans have died in Vietnam since peace talks began in Paris a year ago. Total number of U.S. deaths since the beginning of the war is now 33,641. The Vietnam conflict has become the 4th deadliest war in U.S. history. Estimated number of casualties of Vietnamese civilians and soldiers since the war began is over 1 million.
Dear Bob, thank you for the photograph you gave me last week. It gave me the inspiration I needed. I went to a meeting of the Oberlin Resistance, a draft counseling group. I wasn't sure what I could do to help, but then Elizabeth let them know that I know how to type 125 words per minute. I'm now the designated typist of the movement. I know that although my folks wouldn't understand, you would. I'm placing your photo over the Mao poster. I love that you scribbled a peace sign over your helmet. Peace and love. Amy.
Oberlin Review, April 11th, 1969. 150 students have begun living in the student union to protest the suspension without trial of 3 students who disrupted classes yesterday with guerrilla theater. Organizer of the theatrics was SDS President Jeffrey Linzer.
If I had known I was going to get suspended, I wouldn't have done it. I don't believe in being arrested. I think it's impractical. Like last year when we were surrounded the Navy recruiter's car and someone suggested we go down to City Hall and turn ourselves in. I said, fuck this, not me. But I've always been political, even radical. So were my parents. We were the first family in our DC suburb to sell our home to a black family. Kids I known all my life called me, I can't even say what they called me for that. By the time I get to college, I've decided liberalism is not my friend. Vietnam is a natural result of our society's corrupt values. We need another revolution. This view takes me out of the mainstream of college politics, but who wants to be in the mainstream? The mainstream works for McCarthy in the 68 primaries, and they get fucked over in Chicago. Chicago, downtown, I see army jeeps with barbed wire grills in front of them for crowd control. Friends get beaten for standing in the wrong place. This isn't a difference of opinion here. It's a fight, a nasty fight over who's in charge, and they're willing to hurt us, and a lot of them want to hurt us. When I return to Oberlin, I help organize a counter-orientation. We get over 100 freshmen, and 40 join SDS, which is bigger than all of SDS the year before. I want to have a disciplined, centralized organization that will democratically arrive at decisions and carry them out without dissension. That doesn't go over too big. As the semester wears on, interest in SDS wears thin, and that's okay, because as the semester starts, I get into a rock and roll band, and I get my first college girlfriend, Nina. Nina's beautiful. I never thought she'd go for me, but she comes to a counter orientation, and I find out she came because she was interested in me, and she saw me give a speech once, and she liked how I did it.
First of all, I want to make it clear I didn't go to the counter orientation because I was attracted to Jeffrey. I went because I wanted to fight to create a more just world. But yeah, I did find Jeffrey fascinating intellectually. You don't meet many people who think the Constitution's a bourgeois document. So Jeffrey and I became a couple, and soon I find that a lot of his thoughts are now my thoughts.
Nina unofficially moves into my dorm room. We study, and I play me and harmonica, and I even make the dean's list. Life is good.
Jeffrey uses the same 5 books on Marxism for every single paper. He writes a brilliant Marxist appreciation of Moby Dick.
After the counter inauguration in DC, I'm revved up again politically and determined to rebuild SDS at Oberlin. I make speeches all over the place. I know most people don't want to hear what I have to say, but I keep haranguing them anyway. If I get 1 in 20 to agree with me, that's the one I'm after. But when I'm in my room, when I'm alone in my room, I just lie in my bed and shake. I never cry or anything. I just shake. I don't know why. I just shake. Midterms are coming, and for the first time, I'm not prepared. I haven't cracked a book all semester. I break out in hives, and I keep making speeches.
When it's announced that the Peace Corps recruiters are coming to campus, well, everyone knows the CIA has infiltrated them by now.
I want to take unexpected, exciting action.
So Jeffrey, I, and 2 friends get the idea to do this 30-second skit.
We plan to dress up as Latin revolutionaries and barge into classrooms saying,
We don't want the Peace Corps in our country because they work for the CIA. We don't need your toothpaste.
Peace Corps
out of the third world
now. Something like that. But there's no master plan, mostly. We just look into classroom windows and say, This looks like the one.
Our first stop is George Bear's humanity class. We barge in, tell him why we're there, and he says,
Theater, I love the theater. Now this is what political theater is all about. Quiet down, children. Now go ahead and do your little revolutionary skit.
We don't want the Peace Corps in our country because they work for the CIA. We don't need your toothpaste. Peace Corps out of the third world now.
Oh, bravo, bravo! Wasn't that cute? And now I'd like to spend the rest of the class giving an impromptu lecture on the history of theater as a political medium.
After a couple more classes, we barge into a religion class.
He gave my friend a D once.
As we do our skits, one of our friends points a 5-and-dime machine gun at the professor, who's a real old man.
He cowers in the corner.
I've never seen anyone so scared.
The administration disciplines.
Cool. Hang on. Let's pause there because I brought Andrew back in as the SDS leader.
Okay.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for coming back. We are on page somewhere in the 40s, in the middle of the Jeffrey Nina scene, and we need you to be the SDS leader.
Jeffrey Nina, somewhere in the 40s.
He cowers in
the corner. Actually 51, I think.
Sam, yours is different than everyone else's. Just
why is this happening?
He cowers in the corner is the word.
Ah, there we go. Got it.
Okay. So
am I done?
You are. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Bye, Merehead.
Bye.
Bye.
So Andrew, yeah, you'll turn your camera on. It says in the document, all my SDS friends are encouraging me to break up with Jeffrey.
Okay, cool. And then it's Jeffrey is too intellectual and cautious.
Yep. And then you've got another line, we want to groom you to move up. You're an attractive, articulate woman. We can use that. And then after the next line, you turn your camera off.
All right.
And that's it.
Adjust my
lighting.
lighting.
I've been recording this entire time. Awesome.
Oh. My entrance, was it fabulous?
I'm going to pause whenever you're ready.
The administration just blends me and my friend with the toy machine gun. My friend agrees to sign a paper promising not to encourage any more coercive activity. But me, I can't sign. You see, before this happened, I had just spent 10 days at a national SDS meeting. 10 days of getting the message that college is a form of white skin privilege revolutionaries must reject. Besides, between us, I'd probably flunk out this semester anyway, so signing's out of the option.
Jeffrey is given 24 hours to leave the campus. He's told that if he's found on campus during the rest of the semester, he won't be let back in the fall.
For a while, I live on this farmhouse outside of town. Radicals are visiting me all the time. It feels great, like Lenin in Switzerland. Because of me, students take over the student union. To everyone's surprise, the administration basically ignores it. And after a couple nights, things just sort of peter out and students go back to their dorms.
Jeffrey spends the summer in an SDS collective in Cleveland, but I have other plans.
Nina and I are, well, we're having hard times.
Jeffrey has very set ideas on everything, including my life. I don't need him to tell me what to do. If I want to do something, I will.
One of the things I have a strong opinion about is not screwing other people, especially after I learned Nina's been sleeping with an SDS guy from Kent State. Apparently, he gave better speeches than I did.
All my SDS friends are encouraging me to break up with Jeffrey. One leader tells me,
Jeffrey is too intellectual and cautious.
SDS is very anti-intellectual at this point. Also, anti-monogamy. All loyalty should be to SDS.
We want to groom you to move up. You're an attractive, articulate woman. We can use that.
I work my way up in the SDS chain, going to Columbus, Cincinnati, and San Francisco. I spend a day in meetings with Black Panther leaders, and I watch men land on the moon as I drink tequila and eat rare roast beef naked in bed with one of the SDS heavies. That night, we go to a Chicano neighborhood and listen to some of the guys from Santana play congos until dawn. I feel invincible.
The people in the collective are beginning to depress me. Everyone's trying to remake themselves. I figure you do that too much, you end up shaking in your bed and breaking out in hives. I can't take it anymore, so I leave.
SDS gives me more and more responsibility, partially because I tell them I don't know how to type. I lie. In the fall, I decide not to return to Oberlin. My dad's devastated. He's an immigrant and he never went past grammar school. His whole life, he slaved to put me through the best schools. I tell him what I'm doing, that's the best school.
For my last 2 years at Oberlin, I stay out of politics. I stay out of most things. I only have a couple of, well, I wouldn't call them dates. They're more like fucks, but never twice with the same woman. I'm not anti-monogamy. It just takes a couple of years to get over Nina.
I'm invited to a special meeting run by the top women in SDS. I'm told if I want a leadership position, I have to prove myself. I'm expected to out-macho the men, show I'm tough and committed by proposing tactics more violent than even the toughest guys are considering. While I think about this, friends of mine in New York try to prove themselves by building a makeshift bomb, and they accidentally blow themselves up. I decide to return to Oberlin. My defection from SDS is considered so shocking that a cover-up rumor is started that I'm training secretly with Fidel's forces in Cuba. I feel guilty I let my friends down by leaving the movement, but I sure feel healthier away from it. I bury myself in my work, and I graduate with honors.
Most of my friends, well, they were older, so they're not around anymore. SDS at Oberlin just sort of dies. Me, I just go to classes, I hang out, I watch TV, and I become a ghost.
Oberlin Review, May 16, 1969. 4 Marine Corps recruiters began student interviews in the placement office this morning. Outside the office were 75 protesting students and an equal number of reporters. It is the first time in 4 years that military recruiters have not met with substantial student opposition.
Dear Bob, how I spent my summer vacation, 1969. I decided to live in Greenwich Village. Dad was so shocked, he almost drove up from DC to drive me home. I got a job, got my ears pierced, and I met a guy. A bright, sensitive guy. A bit neurotic, but decent. Turns out, he goes to Oberlin. When the semester began, I started unofficially living with Dan in his dorm room. Fortunately, his roommate is living with another woman in another dorm. Her roommate is gay and is living in with another woman down the hall. Although I still hope Nixon gets caught in a 6-foot blender, I'm glad he's decided to bring 25,000 troops home. Please be part of the next batch back home. Love, Amy.
Oberlin Review, October 3rd, 1969. Without taking an institutional stand, the College Faculty Council has adopted a resolution urging faculty members to suspend classes on October 15th as part of National Vietnam Moratorium Day.
For one day, colleges and cities across the country decide to stop business as usual to protest the war. It's not just a student movement anymore.
In Newton, Kansas, a bell tolls 40,000 times, once for each U.S. serviceman killed.
In Los Alamos, housewives block a bridge leading to a local defense plant.
Time magazine estimates 1 million Americans take part in what it calls a peaceful protest without precedent in U.S. history.
As one of the local coordinators of the October moratorium, I helped set up a series of events. We planned demonstrations at a local draft board, a teach-in, a fast, and a silent noon vigil in the town square.
There have been silent vigils there once a week since the semester began. The usual turnout is only a dozen or so, but for a small town like Oberlin, what can you expect?
When it's time to start the vigil, a few dozen of us stand on the sidewalk at one end of the square. Now, between us, I'm worn out from weeks of planning, so I leave my place in the line and walk to the middle of the square. The line of people is half a block long now, maybe a couple hundred. I'm impressed. Exhausted. So I sit down under a tree and close my eyes. When I awake a half hour later, the town square is completely encircled. There are over 1,000 people, each of them standing silently, bearing witness.
The vigils never make the national media. No outsiders ever see us except for a few cars who drive by. But for me, this is the best protest.
Oberlin Review, November 18th. 400 Oberlin students joined an estimated 400,000 people in Washington, D.C. on November 15th for the largest anti-war rally in U.S. history.
I wanted to go to DC, but I have a job with food service and I can't afford the time off. Between studying and earning enough money to stay in this place, well, I get into big arguments with people about whether activism is a luxury. I want to do something, but when?
Dear Bob, I just got back from the March on Washington. I wish you could have been there. I flashed a peace sign to one of the National Guardsmen, and he gave me the peace sign back. When I got back, I learned that my folks had called while I was away and found out that I had demonstrated. They're beyond rage. Mom yelled over the phone that by going to DC, I might as well have pulled the trigger on you. I told her that if we don't stop this war, more people like you will die. I am so pissed off that you're dead, Bob. I blame everyone.
WOBC News. Demonstrators at the University of California at Santa Barbara rampaged for a second night, pelting police cars with rocks, smashing store windows, and burning a local branch of the Bank of America to the ground. Some demonstrators yelled, quote, "Death to corporations," end quote. Black students at the Women's College Mount Holyoke took over 5 buildings this morning and said they would give their reasons for it later.
I've just become a member of the new Oberlin Commission on the Status of Women. My first job is to plan a march for women's rights on May 1st.
All right, Mayday. Panties, panties, panties.
I'm sorry, there hasn't been a panty raid here in 3 years.
Students today have no respect for tradition.
Our march starts at the south end of campus. By the time we march 2 blocks, hundreds of people have joined us. People are chanting slogans about Nixon and Kissinger and Vietnam. What does this have to do with women's issues?
Nixon went on TV this evening.
He's moving troops into Cambodia.
He's bombing Cambodia.
He's widening the war.
I look out my dorm window and I see a parade of students sweep the campus. I've never demonstrated before, but this time I have to.
Me too. Stop the war.
Stop the war. Stop the war.
Stop the war.
Stop the war. On May 3rd, I stay up all night to write a paper for cultural anthropology. This paper really has to be good because although I've ended up with an interdisciplinary major combining religion, chemistry, and government, I know now that what I really want to do is go to grad school in anthropology. Although my dad's pushing me to go to law school, and he has some very intelligent reasons. So I work all through the night, and in the morning I arrive late for class, hand in the paper, almost start snoozing in the lecture, grab some food, stagger back to the dorm, and fall soundly asleep. When I awake that night around 7:30, nobody's around the dorm. I wander outside and still see almost no one. As I wander through campus, I finally hear some shouting and cheering coming from the school chapel. I run there and see every square inch of it filled with students. It's the evening of May 4th, 1970.
WOBC Bulletin. At Kent State University, National Guardsmen have fired without warning directly into a crowd of unarmed demonstrators, killing 4 students and wounding 10 others. At this moment, students have crowded into Finley Chapel to decide whether or not to strike.
Just as we're about to vote, Dean Fasman enters and...
The administration has declared tomorrow a day of mourning. All classes will be suspended. The administration will meet tomorrow with faculty and student leaders to discuss whether college classes should continue for the final 2 weeks of the semester or if college should be shut down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
I was there. One of my friends was killed today. We have to be serious because they're serious. They shot into a crowd of 100. There was blood all over the hill. If you're going to shut down, do it without violence, because the leaders of this country have no qualms about using it. We have to care if we're going to change this world.
It finally hits me. There's a war zone 60 miles from me.
WOBC News. In response to the killings at Kent State, 441 universities and colleges across the country have either shut down or curtailed classes. There is, in effect, a nationwide student strike.
At Oberlin, the faculty votes to give students the option to continue classes or not. This ends most classes, but nobody leaves. The campus is more active than ever.
I helped form a group called People to People to start communicating about the anti-war movement with Oberlin's townspeople.
I help organize students to attend demonstrations in Columbus and Washington.
Every day I attend the Liberation School, a series of lectures and discussions by faculty on subjects such as
the history of Vietnam, student revolts in Paris 1968, the history of guerrilla warfare, art as politics, police and mass demonstrations, blacks in the war, legal aspects of the war, economic aspects of the war, Western religions in the war, Eastern religions in the war.
American cheese in the war, Swiss cheese in the war.
Shut up! The Liberation School provides the best lectures I ever hear. Subjects that have always seemed dead to me suddenly come alive. Professors that have always seemed dead to me suddenly come alive.
So what? You go to a couple of classes, you feel like you're doing something relevant. But what does that mean?
It means... Oh, I don't know what it means.
Do any of you think that another March on Washington or another door-to-door campaign or another silent vigil is going to accomplish anything? People have been protesting for years now. Our soldiers and the Vietnamese are still dying every day.
So what do you suggest we do? Nothing?
What do I suggest I do? Or what do you suggest I do? Engage in some activity I know is useless just so I can relieve my liberal guilt?
How dare you criticize people just because you don't have the courage to do anything?
Well, get off your high horse. You get off on what you're doing and you know it.
Look, I'm doing my best to contribute to the world. Can you say the same about yourself?
Hey, I think the war stinks as much as any of you, but until you can prove to me that any of this makes a difference, that the world will really be better off because you made another poster or you've attended another rally.
Damn it, there are no guarantees. Maybe the war won't end soon. I don't know where all this will lead, but damn it, there's something terribly wrong going on here. And I refuse to act like I don't care or I don't notice, because I do care. You can accuse me of self-indulgence and sloppy thinking and probably a dozen other things, but the two things you can't accuse me of are not caring and not acting on my beliefs. Come on, we've got work to do.
If you ask me, I bet the administration's pretty pleased there's a strike. Now they won't have to deal with the troublesome students confronting them. So knowing my protests here has the college seals of approval, I go to DC where I attend a few rallies and smoke a lot of pot. Sherby's doing term papers.
I pour myself into the People to People campaign. I set up canvassing routes for students and organize coffee clatches in living rooms and churches. I'm inspired to see people talking and listening, to see professors join in and try to convince people of the immorality of the war. I finally work up the nerve to give my first speech at a gathering in a basement of a Methodist church in a nearby town. I think I'm doing pretty well until a lady asks,
"Is it true all Oberlin students are communists?"
I tried to talk to a lady at the golf course. She tells me that if those children had behaved, they'd still be living.
I expect a lot of hostility, but I find that almost everyone is willing to listen. I'm sure many of these people support the war effort, but when we talk, I'm touched by how sad people seem. They care about the dying just as I do.
When I go to DC for the rally, I stay with friends at my folks' place. When my father sees our black armbands with the Ohio Coalition's O in the center, he says, "That will make a great target, Amy." My dad designs weapons for the military. One of the few times I ever visited him at work, I saw a sketch of something that looked like a shrub. Underneath it was the word twig. Years later, at a lecture at Oberlin, I learned twig is one of the most insidious weapon systems used in Vietnam, killing far more peasants than soldiers. I never tell my dad I know this, although I confront him once in a nightmare, sobbing, "How could you?" After Kent State, I can no longer allow him to pay my college expenses, so I tell him I'll put myself through the rest of school. It takes 12 years to pay off the loans, but my conscience is clear. In 1972, my senior year, I learned the placement office wants to bring back military recruiters on campus. I'm shocked. Nobody's organizing any opposition. So now it's my turn. I start talking with friends, submitting articles to the review, posting flyers, doing whatever I can to mobilize awareness and support. Finally, I meet with the new college president. I'm not sure if he takes me seriously, but no recruiters come, at least not while I'm at Oberlin. I gently shame my parents into attending graduation, where Jesse Jackson gets an honorary degree and where the speaker is the folk singer Pete Seeger, who leads us in songs of peace. Today, I'm even more radical and idealistic than I was in college, and I'm still working to reconcile myself with the world.
Decades later, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about what happened. I'm still very confused.
I feel a sense of privilege to have lived through times that probed and tested and challenged.
I felt I was absolutely right when I burned my draft card. Today, I still think I was right. But I also have to admit, boy, was I naive.
I was trying to do more than stop one war. I wanted to eliminate the use of war as an instrument of policy.
I was one of those pampered, privileged college kids. I wasn't asking a thing.
I remember a golden age in which I lived without compromise. I did what my conscience told me, and I never let fear, personal considerations, or tear gas influence my decisions.
My biggest regret is how the war killed the civil rights movement. All the energy and money that went to the war could have gone towards community development.
I wanted to be a part of something then, and I still somehow want to participate now.
I know I was confused and I know I was frightened at times, but I have never been ashamed, and I will always be proud that I did not sit still.
To me, the challenge now is how to keep working for change without that wonderful, absolute confidence that used to buoy me up.
I spend 50 to 60 hours per week fighting for the health, safety, and security of textile workers. I'm ridiculously underpaid, but once the fire gets lit, it doesn't easily go out.
I work part-time as a computer programmer and part-time at a daycare center.
I'm the head of a progressive publishing house.
I coordinate a cooperative which sells seeds, bulbs, and organic fertilizers.
A doctor.
A clinical social worker.
I work to prevent the destruction of the world's rainforests.
I became a staunch Republican and a fervent anti-communist.
I'm a lawyer, just like my father.
I'm a professor and chair of my campus women's organization. Still go to demonstrations, sometimes finding students surprised to see one of their professors there. They ask me what it was like back then. I tell them we were silly, courageous, sophisticated, stupid, and inspired, sometimes all at the exact same moment.
Dear Bob, I got married, raised a daughter, and I got a job as a professor at a formerly all-male university where I'm paid a salary to help raise well-educated children. 2 of my students are children of Vietnamese refugees. Every time I look at them, I'm reminded that Vietnam is still happening. The issues are still happening. Whether it's Kent State 1970 or who knows what tomorrow, the struggle hasn't ended. It goes on and on.